Welcome to Satsang. So beautiful to be together with you all. Bayan ko jira bahar bol dena ki awaaz kam rakho. So beautiful to be with you all. This is it's a very sacred time for those for whom it's your first time in satsang. The word satsang literally means in the presence of truth. And so it's a time in which together, it's not me teaching you, it's together us diving, dropping into the very truth of who we are and letting go of all of that blocks us from living in that truth. So that's what satsang is, and we usually begin with a question that comes in from our global family who aren't able to be here at this moment physically, but send in questions on social media or all the different channels that they watch it on, or by email or whatever. And then we open it up to any questions that anyone here might have. So there's a microphone right here in the middle of the room. After we take the first question, if you have a question, feel free to just come to the mic and share your name and where you're from and your question. Why is it hardest to forgive yourself? It's an interesting question. It's definitely hard. I'm not sure I would say it's the hardest. For some of us it is. For some of us who are kind of programmed toward guilt, toward shame, depending on our upbringing, depending on what we call sanskaras. For some of us, that sense of I've made a mistake weighs on us much, much more heavily. But I'm not sure that that's true for everyone. I've seen plenty of people for whom it's really quite easy to forgive themselves, and yet they hold on to grudges and anger and pain about things that other people have done for their entire lives. So rather than qualifying which one is harder, we'll take the self-forgiveness for those of us for whom it is quite hard. I think the reason that it's so hard is ultimately we all really want to believe that we're good people. We get up every day, we look at ourselves in the mirror, and the idea that we are not the people we want to be is an awful feeling, an almost incomparatively awful feeling. And whether we feel like we're not the people we want to be because we haven't achieved what we want to achieve. By the way, you're welcome to move more into the middle. I don't know if somebody told you that you have to leave a specific aisle here, but those of you leaning in, just scoot in. Yeah, just scoot in until you can see. Don't worry, you don't have to lean around the tripod. Yeah. I think the aisle was more for as people were coming in, but feel free to sit wherever you can see easily. So the idea that we are not who we'd like to be, where we'd like to be in life, is very, very distressing. In the field of psychology, there's something called cognitive dissonance. And what cognitive dissonance refers to is the internal struggle, the dissonance, the lack of harmony, the lack of balance and peace inside of us when we think one thing, but we do another thing. And so how we're constantly trying to bring those two things into alignment. So for example, if I think that smoking cigarettes is wrong, and I smoke cigarettes and I try to quit, I think it's wrong, therefore my action is I'm trying to quit. But if after trying to quit, I don't quit, something very interesting is going to happen. If I can't change my action, I'm going to change my belief, which is why so many people who do things that we know are bad for you will have all kinds of rationalizations about why it's okay. Oh, my friend's grandmother, smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day and lived to be 95. They'll always have some rationalization because it is essential for them, for their actions and their beliefs to be in concert. Chances are they tried to quit in the past, couldn't quit, so their beliefs changed. You see it with people who cheat. Most of us by nature believe cheating is wrong. We consider ourselves honest people. But when, due to lust or distraction or whatever it is that's going on in our mind, we end up cheating on someone we love, for example, the mind will make up all kinds of stories. Well, they were ignoring me. Well, she wasn't giving me what I wanted. Well, anyway, he had an affair also. Well, we do that because of this cognitive dissonance. Because we can't change our actions now. We've done it, we've cheated. In an affair, on an exam, in taxes. Well, anyway, what's the government need my money for? The government's got tons of money anyway. You hear people come up with all kinds of these rationales that serve only one purpose: bringing back consonance, bringing back alignment between what I think and what I do. So if I do something that I know is wrong, and I feel badly, it's not just regret. It's not just, oh, I should have been more mindful. There's this cognitive dissonance going on. I believe I am a good person. And yet I've acted in this way that by all objective standards is not the way that a good person acts. I consider myself honest, I cheated. I consider myself nice, I lied. I consider myself compassionate, I was obnoxious. I was rude. I consider myself open and embracing. I was discriminatory and I excluded people. Whatever it was. We feel very badly inside. And in a way, that's good. I'm actually all for regret and repentance because it's a very powerful energy that helps us override the call of desire, the call of temptation, the call of our habits, the call of the ego. If I know, I may be tempted to cheat on my husband or wife again, but oh my God, I felt so bad last time that, it took me years to get over it. Maybe that guilt is enough to keep you from doing it again. So I'm actually all in favor, not of guilt, but of regret and repentance. If it's going to keep you behaving better, more in alignment with your values in the future. Because once you start changing your beliefs to match your actions, that's a very slippery slope. That's a very scary place to be in. Once you have to start rationalizing bad behavior in order to feel okay about yourself. Very slippery slope. It's much better to regret, to feel badly, to apologize, to make amends, to pledge to be more skillful and conscious in the future. The other reason, though, that a lot of us harbor this guilt about past mistakes is because, sadly, a lot of us have been raised to not feel so confident about ourselves. A lot of us have been raised in cultures, in families of origin, that give us all kinds of guilt trips about what good children do, what it's like. And so we carry this guilt throughout our life. I remember 2018, March 1st morning. No, sorry, February 28th morning, 2018. I wake up in the morning and there's missed calls from my dad. There's texts from my dad. Hadn't heard the calls in the night. The texts, they call me immediately. I call and my mom had had a horrible stroke. As it turned out, she had another one a few years later, but this was the first. And she was conscious, she was okay, we talked. They had rushed her to the hospital, and she was going in for brain surgery the following day. She very much wanted me to be there for the operation. I immediately found out tickets. There was no way whatsoever, even if I left Rishikesh at that moment, that I could actually be there before her surgery. By the time to get from Rishikesh to Delhi to catch an international flight to LA, there was no way to get there before her operation. So we decided amongst the three of us that it made much more sense in that case for me not to come now, to wait for the operation, let her go through some rehab, and then when she was ready to come home from the hospital, to come back at that point and help smooth the transition. Okay. Following day, March 1st, was the first day of our International Yoga Festival. And beautiful day. We were celebrating on that day Holi. And we had this beautiful drummer, Shivamaniji, with us, who's a world-famous drummer, percussionist. And we were in our back garden playing Holi, dancing. He's drumming, we're dancing. And I'm just in this ecstasy, throwing flowers on everybody at this eco-friendly Holi, and we're literally all just dancing and being bathed in flower petals. And suddenly I had this just sharp moment of inner panic. And I stopped and I thought, what's going on? And then I remembered, oh, my mom's having an operation. Of course, naturally, I'm panicked. But I've always been very introspective and very hard on myself from a truth perspective. And I thought about it more and more, and I realized Mom's operation doesn't actually panic me. Like, of course, I want her to be okay. But the idea of something happening to her didn't actually cause the type of panic that I was feeling in me at that time. And I went deeper and deeper. I'm like, what is the source of this panic? And I realized the panic was a panic of being bad daughter. That there was a voice in my, 2018, 6 years ago, my 47-year mind that said, your mother is having an operation. You are dancing and celebrating. How dare you? Bad daughter, bad daughter, bad daughter. And the panic was not actually the panic of the operation, but the panic of being bad daughter. And I share the story because at 47 years old, I certainly thought that I had kind of worked through all of that stuff. You know, you spend the number of years that I have working psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and you sort of think, yeah, I've worked through all of this. But the guilt that so many of us are programmed to feel about who we are, and especially in our core roles in life, daughter, son, mother, father, husband, wife, sister, brother. Some of us feel it in our work, but we have this sense of there being something not right about us. And so we are primed to take in all of these messages of you've done something wrong, you are bad, you are wrong. And we carry this guilt in ways that might lay dormant for decades. And then suddenly you realize, oh my God, there you are again. But it's not something to let run your life. It's something to just notice. Guilt. That level of panic. Again, if you've actually made a mistake, do whatever you can to fix it. Feel regret, feel repentance. Do whatever you need so you don't make the mistake again. But if it's this pervasive guilt around things that no longer can be changed, you gotta let yourself go. You've gotta just notice it. Bow to your own human journey, your own karmic journey, and say, yeah, here's where we are. And have that level of love and compassion for yourself that honors your journey. Just the same way that we learn to forgive and love and honor other people's journey. So yeah, great question. Other questions that anyone here might have? Yes, come forward to the mic.
Hello. Hey. So there are so many spiritual paths. In Hindu philosophy itself, there's everything from Sankhya to yoga. I've really been drawn to Vedanta myself. But even within Vedanta, there's so many kind of different approaches to it. So how do I choose a path?
Great question. Yeah. The Sanatan Dharma tradition is so expansive, so vast and varied in the nearly infinite number of ways that you can access divine truth. How do you choose? What I would say is sometimes it happens automatically. Sometimes you have an experience with the divine. In a bhakti tradition, for example, you're chanting, you're singing, you're praying, you're doing puja, and an experience just happens. For me, I had an experience like that with Hanumanji when I read the Ramayana the first time. It just happened. Wasn't expecting it to happen, it just happened. Had an experience like this with Ganga, having Ganga's darshan the first time. But a lot of times, the way to find it is to learn a little bit about different paths, and you don't have to learn all of them, because there's really only two major distinctions. There's little, definitely nuanced branches amongst them, but there's two major distinctions. One is what you could consider the dual tradition, a tradition of bhakti. We are separate from God, we worship God, we love God, we pray to God. And then we have the Advaita tradition, the non-dual tradition. Typically in the Advaita Vedanta tradition. But here's the thing, they're not mutually exclusive. It's not that you have to choose one. Take wisdom and experience from wherever you find it. So for example, in my heart, I'm a bhakti by heart. I love discovering that I've got tears pouring down my eyes that I didn't even realize were there, singing in the arti, opening my eyes and realize, oh my God, you're crying. And just having been in such a state of loving God. I love waking up in the morning to a gratitude practice and just feeling my eyes fill with tears of love and gratitude to the divine, of hiking through the woods and seeing God in every tree, in every bird, in every insect, in every blade of grass, and feeling that. And I love studying, learning how we are. There's nothing but God. It's a lot harder to move through the world as. It's a lot harder to move through the world truly anchored in the awareness that you are nothing but consciousness and that everything is happening in your consciousness, which is the core belief of Advaita Vedanta, that there is no distinction. Everything is Brahman, everything is existence. And that all of this is happening in that consciousness. The metaphor, analogy that they give all the time is about dreaming. You know, the dream seems real. You go places, you see things, you say things, you do things, you meet people. And when you wake up, you realize it all took place in your own mind. That there's nothing there except you. And in the same way, the teaching is, all of this is happening just in consciousness. I am that consciousness. I love the teachings. I love reading commentary, scriptures, books by those masters, listening to lectures. It makes my head just go, you know, you feel like that because it's so powerful that you literally have to just sort of stop where you are and listen. But it's very hard to move through the world with that. And so what I would say is, you know, take wisdom, take experience from all of it. There's nobody I know in even the hardcore Vedanta tradition who says, thou shalt not love God. Don't pray to God, don't worship God, don't have bhakti. And in the real masters of that tradition who I've been blessed to meet, they're lovers of God. The two things coexist in them. Advaita masters and lovers of God. And for me, those two things coexist very, very, very easily, very beautifully. The teachings of the yogic tradition, again, a whole other school, as you say, coexist very easily through tools, through techniques. I'd say adopt and embrace as much of it as you can without getting confused. But I think that you could easily bring in core Advaita philosophy, meditations, teachings, awarenesses, truths, and a beautiful bhakti path, and a yogic tradition, and a karma yoga path. I feel like we need all of the paths, or as many of them as we possibly, again, can implement and include in our lives without letting our heads get confused, because they all offer something different. And as we try to keep ourselves out of the clutches of our ego, out of the clutches of subconscious programming, out of the clutches of desire, of vasanas, of all of that. Use whatever you can use in that moment. Sometimes it's pure, powerful philosophy. Sometimes it's open-hearted love for God. Sometimes it's a headstand, or pranayama, or a meditative practice. Use whatever you can grab in that moment to pull you out of illusion and into truth. Yeah, beautiful. Other questions? Yes.
Good evening. My question is, as a human we forget, but when we forgive, it's called divine. Why?
Why is it divine to forgive?
As a human, I believe that it's very difficult for us to forgive somebody. It's not very easy.
Absolutely.
So when we forgive something, it's like a divine. But as a human, it's very natural tendency that we forget what you have did, whether it is a good or whether it is bad. We forget on the next day.
That we forget.
Yes.
We don't forgive, but we forget. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes. And it's very easy for a human to we forget very easily. But it's very difficult for us to forgive someone. So that's why we say that as a human we forget, but when we forgive, it's a divine. So if you can just explore on that.
Is there a specific question in there?
Nothing like that. This is what I am feeling and this is what I am undergoing for last, for 6 months. So like that, I just thought to ask you.
Sure. So there's two types of forgetting. First of all, let's take the forgetting part. There's two types of forgetting. One is cognitive, one is emotional. Cognitive forgetting happens all the time, as I would imagine every one of us can attest to. You walk into a room, you're like, and what am I doing here? Like, what did I come in here to get? I know I came in here for something. What did I come in here for? You meet someone one day, you meet them the next day, or a week later, you cannot remember their name. Or you don't even remember having met them. You learn something, some fact, and all the time, they study, they hear, they learn, they go to take an exam, they cannot remember. It's cognitive learning. There's a lot of reasons that we forget. I won't go into all of that now, but it's basically the workings of the brain. Workings of attention, of focus, of memory formation. But then there's the emotional forgetting. And sadly, we don't forget very easily at all. The number of people who remember what someone did to them that was wrong decades later. Oh yeah, this guy, 30 years ago, I remember we were here and he did this to me. You think, really? You've carried that for 30 years? People carry all kinds of things, typically negative. Typically negative stuff, not always. So forgetting is not actually so easy in that way. It would be nice if we forgot the negative things people did to us, the mistakes others made, but we actually tend not to. Most of us remember almost all of the mistakes that others have done to us throughout our lives. Forgiving is difficult for many reasons, partly because there's a mistaken belief that we have, and it may be subconscious, unconscious, it's not always a conscious belief, but there's a belief that we have that somehow if we forgive, that we are absolving that person of their karmic due. That somehow forgiving is us saying to the universe, it's okay. And so a lot of times we hold on because it's not okay. And because we have this belief that ideally that person will come back and fix things and make them right. It never happens, or almost never happens. We are stuck then holding anger and pain that poisons us. It's like that beautiful saying that, being angry is like swallowing poison but expecting the other guy to die. It's what we do. We hold on to the grudges, thinking that somehow our grudge, our anger, is going to make that other person realize what they've done, make them come back to us, make them fix it. It doesn't, usually. All it does is it burns us and poisons us. And so, yeah, forgiving is hard, but it's a critical core part of emotional growth, of psychological healing, and certainly of spirituality. Yeah, nobody ever said any of this was going to be easy. But it's the path that we walk because it actually takes us to the destination we want to go. The easy path doesn't always get you where you want to go. So life gives us challenges, but also gives us tools to face those challenges. Yeah, great. Any other questions? Yes. Namaste.
My name is Angel, and I'm visiting from Sydney. My question or inquiry, I would say, I've been coming to India for 20 some odd years for trips. And I always find that when I go back, I have a very supportive family, but it's hard to, when you return and you share what you've learned and obviously evolved or grown, some people will say, what do you get when you go? Then you explain your experience and they might be interested, whereas some don't ask you at all. But you go back different every time.
Yes.
So my question or inquiry, whatever you want to call it, is how do you reconcile when we return as a foreigner, myself coming?
Yeah.
And have you experienced that? And it's like when I come here, I'm a sponge and I get full and wet and I'm just so full. And when I go back, I tend to plan my next trip before I even land. And you start to dry up like a sponge and it gets smaller. So how do you reconcile that as a foreigner going back and
beautiful.
amalgamating? Yeah, thank you.
Sure, beautiful. So there's a couple of pieces to that, to the going back part. The first part is the mistake that we all make, which is to try to share that which you've gained with friends and family and colleagues. It's a beautiful, pure, generous, loving intention. It typically falls flat, and it ends up taking your energy and enervating you in a way that we expect it's going to energize us and share this with others, but it typically tends to go the other direction. So the first piece is be careful and choosy about who you share it with, because you don't want to be pouring that beautiful juice that you are wet with into a bucket that has no bottom. And a lot of people just have not yet developed the container to be able to hold that which you're sharing. And so it just goes right through them and splat on the floor. And sometimes they may even react negatively to it. People have a lot invested in the status quo. As I am, as I do, as I think, that is the way things should stay. A lot of people have a lot invested in that. And when you come in with a whole new way of thinking, a whole new way of living, a whole new perspective of actually what might matter in life, actually what our priorities might be, it's incredibly threatening and off-putting to a lot of people. So be careful. Be careful. Hold on to the juice. Share it with those who are thirsty for it. They'll find you. They'll find you. They'll let you know. You'll know. That's the first piece. The second piece is recognize that one of the most powerful things you can actually do for another person is just allow yourself to be changed rather than trying to bring that change to them. I remember when I first came and would then go back and visit my parents and friends and people back there, and I made the same mistake. I would try to explain and convince them, and all it did was make them all think that I had completely lost my marbles and been brainwashed and joined a cult and, all of these sorts of things. And what Pujya Swamiji kept trying to tell me over time, I didn't listen. I was like, but I've got to tell them. I've got to share it. And what I learned over time finally from him was, just live your truth. Don't try to shove it down people's throats. Don't speak words they do not understand and that they misinterpret and misunderstand. Just live your truth. I'll never forget the day that my mom said to me, I had been in India maybe, not even that long, maybe a year or two. I had stopped trying to convince or tell. I was just doing what my guru said and just living my truth but not telling it. And I'll never forget the day my mom said, God, just being in your presence makes me feel so serene. And my mom had severe anxiety issues. And so that was a major thing for her. The word serene, from a first-person perspective, was not something that came out of her mouth frequently at all. And that was huge. It made me know she's getting a taste of what's happening to me without me trying to cognitively explain it to her in a way that scares her and disrupts her status quo. And then slowly, they started to come around. I'll never forget the day I had been in South Africa with Pujya Swamiji at a beautiful Shivananda ashram in Durban, where the Swamiji who used to run it, they had this Olympic-sized swimming pool. And whenever anyone came from India, they had people bring bottles of Ganga water. And there's a saying, a teaching, a belief that even a drop of Ganga water in a body of water gives the water the power of Ganga. So they would pour these bottles of water into this Olympic-sized swimming pool and have Ganga Arati every night around the swimming pool. Little African girls, some Indian, some local African girls dressed in saris doing arati around this swimming pool every night. And I had mentioned it to my parents, and I'll never forget when Swamiji and I were coming into LA, and my mom said, do you think you could bring some Ganga water and we could have arati around our jacuzzi? And that was huge. I mean, it was huge for them to actually want that. As, funny as it is to think about it, the idea of, arati around a jacuzzi, but the fact that she had gone from brainwashed, joined a cult, kidnapped, to, do you think we could have some of that here in just a few years? Is the power of your transformation. So you just live that, you just be that. It will impact people in their own way. And then the last piece about drying up. Yes, we do. It is why we keep coming back and charging our batteries. I will tell you that as time goes by, you develop better and better internal mechanisms of holding the water longer. It's like an internal rainwater harvesting situation that goes on, that you seem better able, I've noticed this with myself, better able to retain the wetness for longer periods of time. But you do still need to keep coming back and recharging those batteries. Yeah. Beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, everyone. I look so forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And do be sure, as always, to take advantage of all of the beautiful yoga classes and meditation classes and philosophy classes that we have here at the ashram, the beautiful morning yagna ceremony, the arti, of course. But just let your day fill as much as you can with all of the beautiful offerings. I know many of you are filling your day in seva, which is an incredibly powerful form of yoga, of meditation. But yeah, just be sure to take advantage of everything that's here while you're here. And so much love to you all.